In today's video, we show 6 young people who lose control in court as they hear their harsh sentences. From outbursts of tears to fits of rage and desperate attempts to justify their actions, these youths were convinced they would get away with just a slap on the wrist. But the moment they are confronted with the harsh reality is shocking. Number 1. Dylan Schumacher. 16-year-old Schumacher was charged with second-degree murder and child abuse. On the evening of March 19, 2013, Ashley Smith said goodbye to her 2 sons to head to her night shift at a restaurant, leaving them in the care of her boyfriend, Schumacher. She had no idea it would be the last time she would see her sons alive. 4 hours later, Springville police officers responded to an emergency call from Schumacher. The 23-month-old boy he was looking after was unconscious. Officers rushed to the house, but the child was already dead. Alarmingly, his face, neck, and arms were covered in bruises. The next day, Schumacher was arrested. It turned out that little Austin had cried all night, which angered Schumacher so much that he smothered the 1-year-old's face with a pillow, killing him. At his sentencing, Schumacher broke down in tears in court and apologized to his ex-girlfriend. It was a moving moment, but the judge knew details that Schumacher was unaware of. His actions that night also came to light. The 16-year-old blonde boy had no tears left when he was sentenced to 25 years to life. Number 2. Dante Wright. Dylan Schumacher's actions were horrifying, but Dante Wright was not far behind. Wright was charged with armed robbery and second-degree murder. On October 4, 2016, a janitor found the body of 18-year-old Jordan Klee, a high school athlete from Michigan, just minutes from his home. The young man was killed by a single gunshot to the back of the head. The crime was a failed robbery staged by Jarius Allison, 19, Del Reno Gracie, 18, and Dante Wright, 17. Wright was identified as the shooter. In court, Wright showed no remorse. When Klee's mother testified, Wright only grinned at her. Then he asked to speak in court and taunted everyone present. "I just wanted to say I'll be back home soon. Rest in peace, Klee. I love my family." But his smile quickly disappeared when the judge reprimanded him. "In my 23 years, I've never refused a plea deal, but seeing you sit here laughing and shaking your head as if this means nothing has convinced me to reject the deal. We will go to trial, and if found guilty of murder, you will spend the rest of your life in prison." Wright's demeanor changed drastically as he realized the gravity of his actions. The court adjourned for an hour to allow Klee's family to decide if they wanted to proceed with the trial. Luckily for Wright, the Klees had seen enough of him. The trial continued, and he was sentenced to 52 years, eligible for parole after 25 years. Number 3. Thomas T.J. Lane. Wright's behavior in court was hard to stomach, but just wait until you hear what Thomas T.J. Lane did. Lane was charged with aggravated murder, attempted murder, and felonious assault. On the morning of February 27, 2012, students at Chardon High School in Chardon, Ohio, gathered in the cafeteria for breakfast when chaos suddenly erupted. A brave coach chased the shooter out, but not before 3 students were killed and 3 others injured, including Nick Walczak, who is now confined to a wheelchair. Witnesses identified the shooter as Thomas T.J. Lane, a former student of Chardon High School who had a personal grudge against one of his victims, who was dating his ex-girlfriend. Lane was quickly arrested, and the court decided to try him as an adult, exposing him to the death penalty. Lane pleaded guilty to his sentencing. Lane entered the courtroom wearing a blue shirt, which he unbuttoned to reveal a white t-shirt with the word killer scrawled on it. Smirking at the victims' families, Lane rolled his eyes and gave the middle finger when asked if he had anything to say, adding, "I'll be out soon." Lane was sentenced to 3 consecutive life terms without parole, but his story didn't end there. A year later, Lane made headlines again when he escaped from prison with 2 other inmates. However, the escape lasted only 6 hours. Lane was transferred to a maximum security facility, where he now spends 23 hours a day in solitary confinement. Number 4. Nicholas Lindsay. T.J. Lane's lack of remorse sealed his fate. Perhaps he should have sought advice from Nicholas Lindsay, whose poor attitude cost him a chance at a reduced sentence. The 16-year-old was charged with the premeditated murder of Officer Dave Crawford of the St. Petersburg Police Department in Florida on the evening of February 21, 2011. Officer Crawford responded to a call about a suspicious person near Tropicana Field Stadium. Crawford spotted the suspect, exited his vehicle, and was immediately met with gunfire. Officer Crawford was found with multiple gunshot wounds as he reached for his notepad. Over 200 officers launched a citywide manhunt, ultimately leading to the arrest of 16-year-old Lindsay. Despite initially pleading innocence, investigators had an ace up their sleeve: Lindsay's parents. During a 30-minute conversation with his parents, Lindsay confessed. His father urged him, "Do the right thing now," and Lindsay admitted to the shooting. In court, Lindsay's defense portrayed him as a frightened teen who panicked in a dangerous neighborhood. The prosecution disagreed, and Lindsay was convicted and sentenced to life in prison without parole a year later. A U.S. Supreme Court ruling brought the case back into the spotlight, granting Lindsay a chance at a reduced sentence during a retrial. However, Lindsay showed no remorse throughout the proceedings. The judge ultimately reaffirmed the life sentence, and Lindsay took it in stride. His mother was equally indifferent to the outcome. Number 5. Kendria Cook's social apps can be great for meeting new people, forming friendships, or even finding love. But for some like Kendria Cook, they're tools for finding victims. The 18-year-old Cook was charged with car theft, attempted car theft, and aggravated assault in June 2017. Mary Nieder and her boyfriend Emmanuel Purcell drove to meet Cook in South Daytona. Purcell had been chatting with Cook on the dating app Meet Me. Shortly after Cook entered their red van, a masked man with a gun entered too. The masked man, 17-year-old Kenrick Bess, Cook's boyfriend, fired a shot, injuring one of the men. When the carjacking failed, Cook planned another robbery the next day, recruiting 4 men for the job. Cook lured her next victim via the same dating app to a park where Bess and his crew ambushed and stole the car. Months later, Cook was arrested and pled guilty. However, she and her mother were shocked when the judge sentenced her to 20 years in prison. Cook asked for a final hug from her mother, but was handcuffed and taken away. Later, it was revealed that her attorney had misled her about the sentencing terms. Her case was retried, and Cook was ultimately sentenced to 11 years in prison. Number 6. Shondell Jackson. When Rosetta Jackson heard about the murder of Nathan Potter on the news, she felt sympathy for the victim's family. Little did she know that her own son was the killer. Shondell Jackson was charged with first-degree murder and robbery on July 6, 2009. Nathan Potter, a 21-year-old University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee student, was walking home after a night out near the River West District when he was attacked by 19-year-old Jackson and his friend, Derek Thomas. They demanded money, but when Potter said he had none, Jackson shot him in the chest, killing him. Jackson fled and hid with relatives in Mississippi, but his uncle, Gerald Hawkins, turned him into the police. In court, Jackson displayed no remorse, made obscene gestures toward Potter's family, and even smiled as he left the courtroom. His confidence vanished when he was found guilty and sentenced to life without parole. Jackson erupted in anger, shouting profanities as deputies used pepper spray and force to remove him. His family also lashed out at the victim's family. Which of these cases shocked you the most? Do you think the punishments for these dangerous youths were fair? Share your thoughts in the comments below.